First of all, my son's done nothing wrong. I trust him. I have faith in him.
The president's son is facing possible jail time after being found guilty on 3 federal charges.
And he's a grown man. And it turns out he did not do a single thing wrong, as everybody's investigated.
Jurors did not believe his story. They found him guilty, and now he is a convicted felon 3 times over.
And it impacts my presidency by making me feel proud of him.
It is the first time in history a president's son has been found guilty of a crime while his father was in office.
He is the smartest man I know. I mean, in pure intellectual capacity.
Will he actually go to jail after this conviction?
The maximum he could face is 25 years.
I think Joe Biden is going to be a great president. I think he's going to bring decency back and dignity to the White House.
Where's Hunter?
He's the smartest man Joe ever knew in his life. Yeah, head to Hunter got hot. Hunter got hot. Hunter got hot. La, da, 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 da.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
Byron Donalds, was hosting an event talking about, all the things going on in the country. Well, lo and behold, Donalds made remarks that the media have tried to repurpose as Byron Donalds thinks we should go back to the Jim Crow era.
But he's basically saying that during the Jim Crow period, which is post-slavery, like 100 years later, black people were in better condition than they are now, right?
When there were slave patrols and things like that.
The problem that the Democrats want to create, and this is a creation on their part, is that because I said Jim Crow, they think I'm talking about some golden era. What's important here in this entire phony controversy is that Joe Biden, his campaign, Democrat leadership, and the terrible press want to make an issue. They want to gaslight black people in this country. They want to make black people think in America that Republicans look at Jim Crow as it was some great time in American history. That is not true. They are gaslighting, they're lying. And so, Bill, to be blunt with you, I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm not going to go and do an apology tour. I'm going to stand up to them in the foolishness that they're trying to concoct, because what they want to see happen is black people, quote unquote, stay voting for Democrats, and they will use race, they will gaslight, they will lie, they will twist words for that to be accomplished. But I'm not going to let them twist my words. I'm going to stand up to them.
You see, during Jim Crow, the black family was together.
That's right.
During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative, because black people always have been conservative-minded, but more black people voted conservatively.
What's your response?
My response is that it's very interesting how people can just lie and mischaracterize what I said. I never said or insinuated anything about Jim Crow being better. Just was talking about the marriage rates of black families in America during that time period. It's an empirical fact.
You mentioned Jim Crow. Wait a minute. I've watched your video. You mentioned Jim Crow 4 times. One time you referred to families. All families did less. They had higher divorce rates in the 60s and 70s as the nation opened up. This wasn't because of Jim Crow kept blacks scared. Blacks couldn't vote. Those families couldn't go downtown. I mean, to in any way infer that the families, black families, were better than Jim Crow. I mean, I've said things that I've later said I shouldn't have said it that way.
I've never said that.
Can't you own that even sanitizing Jim Crow, even if that wasn't your intention, was to say, that's my intention, I'm sorry for using those words?
Well, first of all, I never sanitized Jim Crow. I was just talking about the era in which black marriage rates were higher than they were during the Great Society and every other point in American history.
But why did you say Jim Crow?
Because that's the period of time, Reverend.
You see, during Jim Crow, the black family was together.
A period of time was the 50s, if you want to say the 50s.
That's when it happened.
You said Jim Crow.
That's when it happened. Because that was the era in which marriage rates were higher. Look, you had Joe Biden a couple years ago talking about Jim Crow 2.0, talking about Georgia's law, and he lied. He lied then.
This makes Jim Crow look like Jim Eagle.
You name Jim Crow. There's only one way you could deal with Jim Crow, and that's by race. I mean, look, look. You and I have mutual friends. People say you're a straight shooter. We may disagree on politics. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. But look, you were born in Brooklyn. You went down into the South, went to Florida State. You have an interracial marriage. You have an interracial marriage. You're the congressman of a district that's not a black district. I mean, how can you even live with yourself acting like Jim Crow was a good era or better era for blacks? What happened to you?
Okay, that's real cute. That's real cute. I did not say that. And I'm not going to sit here and insinuate that against you. Because right now you're lying about what I said. I did say Jim Crow. I did reference it 3 times.
And you on your own brought up Jim Crow. In fact, you said Jim Crow 3 times for emphasis.
I did say Jim Crow. I did reference it 3 times.
3 times for emphasis.
Reference it 3 times. That's not to say that it was better. I never said that. Those words never came out of my mouth.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Said that those words never came out of my mouth. When are you gonna get that through your skull and everybody else's skull? I never said that. And the difference between me and a lot of other Republicans, I'm not going to sit here.
You said it was better for us.
I'm not gonna let you
under Jim Crow to bring families together. Did you say that?
Hakeem Jeffries was lying. The Biden campaign was lying. Go look at my words.
Well,
go look at my words.
Right. People can
did
look
I
at
say
your
Jim
words.
Crow was better? No, I did not.
You said
I did not
under
say Jim Crow was better.
I
never said it was good. I did not have nostalgia. I never said any of those things. I was talking about black families and black family marriage rates during that time. And the.
All right, then what did Jim Crow do to contribute to black families?
The marriage rates during the Jim Crow era were higher for black families up until the point of the Great Society. I did not say that. I said they were. And this is the problem. Because you're trying to say that I said because of Jim Crow marriages were at a higher rate. I did not say that. I said during. I said during.
You see, during Jim Crow, the black family was together.
I mean, Congressman, all right, let's go to this. Donald Trump.
Hold it now. Trump won and you know it.
Pump up the volume.
Trump won and you know
pump up the volume.
The fake news will never show it. Yeah, 'cause it's true. Trump won and you know it.
Pump up the volume.
Trump won and you know it. America! Trump won and you know it.
Here we go again.
The fake news will never show it. America! 'Cause it's true. Trump won and you know it.
Here we go again. Go, Shorty.
Donald Trump suggested twice, just this week, that he might seek retribution against political enemies of if he's elected president.
Trump didn't say he would lock his opponents up. He said he could, because Democrats opened up a Pandora's box when they did it to him. Could and would. 2 different things.
That he might seek retribution against political enemies of if he's elected president.
Plus, Trump says he wouldn't. It's bad for the country.
Also tried to link his legal problems to the injustices African Americans have suffered at the hand of our legal system. Why should black Americans believe that Trump is serious about criminal justice reform when he only seems concerned about it when it applied to him?
What do you see as the significance of African American men in this election?
Thank you, everybody.
Both of you.
I see them identifying with Trump.
Why do you say that?
Because they got RICO charges.
When he only seems concerned about it when it applied to him. You know the record. You're from Brooklyn, what he did around the Central Park case. You know the record that he was president when George Floyd was killed by police. He said nothing. President when George Floyd was killed by police. He said nothing.
Well, it was a terrible thing. It should never have happened. Something snapped, I think, with the policeman.
Was president when George Floyd was killed by police. He said nothing.
The death of George Floyd on the streets of Minneapolis was a grave tragedy. It should never have happened.
That he was president when George Floyd was killed by police. He said nothing.
I want to express our nation's deepest condolences and most heartfelt sympathies to the family of George Floyd. A terrible event, terrible, terrible thing that happened.
By police, he said nothing. Had protesters moved from in front of a church, made a speech denouncing the protesters.
Inspector General has just released a report about the controversial clearing of Washington, D.C.'s Lafayette Square Park. Ken, what exactly does this report tell us?
Which is, it finds essentially that the decision by the park police to clear that park of protesters had nothing whatsoever to do with Donald Trump's desire to have a photo op or to walk through that park.
Made a speech denouncing the protesters.
Equal justice under the law must mean that every American receives equal treatment in every encounter with law enforcement, regardless of race, color, gender, or creed. They have to receive fair treatment from law enforcement. They have to receive it. We all saw what happened last week.
He's talking about equal protection under the law, regardless of race.
He has no problem talking about locking up his political opponents or homeless or asylum seekers.
Could and would. Two different things.
But he now wants to act like he's a victim of something. What is your response to that, Congressman?
Well, first of all, during the Trump presidency, he also signed into law reforms to criminal justice reform, the first step back, which actually helped get a lot of people released who were imprisoned under the '94 crime bill that was authored by Joe Biden, one of the worst pieces of crime legislation that's really impacted a lot of people in the black community.
You and I agree on the '94 crime bill. I marched on it, and Joe Biden has said that it went too far.
But the former vice president disagreed about the impact of that legislation.
This idea that the crime bill generated mass incarceration, it did not.
But Donald Trump has not dealt with his own record of discrimination. If you're talking about the two candidates, Donald Trump, unlike Biden, who talked about how the crime bill did go too far,
it did not.
Donald Trump has not dealt with his discrimination, that he was sued by the Justice Department in housing, what he did with Central Park 5, what he's done in various race cases, and explained as president what he did with George Floyd. You were in Congress.
What did he do with George Floyd? He didn't do anything with George Floyd. What are you talking about?
That's exactly right.
What did he do against it? He did not do anything. The only thing he said is that riots in America do need to stop. Well, first of all, let's talk about that legislation, because there were actually
policing bill.
The president today signing an executive order when it comes to police reform.
It's the first major action taken by the Trump administration since the death of Houston native George Floyd.
There were two bills that were going through Congress at the time. The bill that could have went through and passed was the one by Senator Tim Scott, and the only difference between that bill and the bill that was being moved by my Democrat colleagues is because my Democrat colleagues wanted to get rid of qualified immunity.
Right. You were on the ground asking for the reforms, and as I understand it, my sources tell me everything you asked for was in this bill and more.
Absolutely. I tell you, the president's response to this situation has been nearly perfect. I asked for certain things in the executive order. He went further. I didn't ask for a national database. I thought that was outside of our reach. But the president said, I want to solve this problem. And he did. All we needed to complement the president's executive order was the Democrats to show up and be counted. Just a few Democrats, not 46, just 7 Democrats. And we couldn't get 7 people to come to the table and say they're serious about police reform. Instead, what they're serious about is using police reform as a campaign issue this November. That is despicable.
Being moved by my Democrat colleagues is because my Democrat colleagues wanted to get rid of qualified immunity. Right. That was the only difference in the bill. Local law enforcement universally said, if you get rid of qualified immunity, you're going to have less officers on the streets. And so the Democrats did not want that bill to go forward. I believe Nancy Pelosi was speaker at the time, and that's why that bill could not get through the House.
They did not vote for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And did you vote for it, you in Congress?
I wasn't in Congress at the time when that occurred, but I will tell you that the reason I was not in.
Democrats effectively blocking debate on Republicans' police reform bill. The move effectively stalling police reform in the Congress, even as the House now likely to approve its own police reform bill.
So the only way you would have supported a bill to hold police accountable is if police would not be individually accountable? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because if you most police officers make $60,000 to $70,000 a year. If they are not individually liable in civil court, How many people are going to sign up to be police officers? With all the millions of encounters they go through every single year, people aren't going to do that. That's not my words. That's the words of officers I talk to.
Maybe if they knew they were liable, they would behave differently.
The vast majority of officers do not do that. The vast majority of officers are good public servants. They serve our communities every single day. You know this, Al.
The vast majority of people, Congressman, don't commit crimes, but that doesn't mean we don't need laws. Let me go to this one.
But qualified immunity is a bad solution. It would not have been good. It would have not been good.
And Donald Trump opposed it and did not come with any police reform at all.
President Trump has signed an executive order to address police reform. This comes nearly a month after the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis in police custody.
And Donald Trump opposed it and did not come with any police reform at all.
President Trump has signed an executive order on police reform amid national calls for change.
Did not come with any police reform at all.
Today, I'm signing an executive order encouraging police departments nationwide to adopt the highest professional standards to serve their communities.
It was a police reform bill that happened during George Floyd that Donald Trump, as president of the United States, when George Floyd was killed, what did he support for police reform? Donald Trump.
President Donald Trump just signed an executive order on police reform, a move that comes after weeks of nationwide protests.
Did Donald Trump then say, we'll do this about police reform? This is wrong what happened to George Floyd?
Nancy Pelosi would not let it through the House. She was Speaker. You should ask Nancy why she didn't put it on the floor.
No, I'm asking you then, what was the Republican bill around reform?
Now President Donald Trump is taking his first steps at police reform in the wake of Floyd's death.
President Trump declared he's the law and order president, even as he signed an executive order encouraging new standards for police reform.
We must improve accountability, increase transparency, and invest more resources in police training, recruiting, and community engagement.
A man was killed. He was president.
It was the Tim Scott. I just told you the bill. It's the Tim Scott bill. And
when Donald Trump went in front of that church and stood up there with the Bible, he did not tout any reform bill at all. End of story. And
the order encourages police departments to collect and track excessive force complaints. It has incentives for police to update their training certifications, and it employs mental health professionals to work with police to respond to some incidents.
As part of this new credentialing process, chokeholds will be banned, except if an officer's life is at risk.
If Tim Scott's was the bill, then why didn't the president come out and call on the Congress and the country to rally around that bill? He said nothing.
The president also met privately with African-American families impacted by police brutality or racially motivated civilian violence, including the family of Ahmaud Arbery, who was gunned down while jogging in Georgia.
President Trump says he will work with Congress on additional reform legislation being worked on Capitol Hill.
You know it, and I know it.
First of all, I don't know. Donald Trump talks a lot. You should ask him that question.
Well,
I will tell you that Nancy Pelosi did not let that bill come up in the House. She was Speaker. Ask her.
I do remember one thing that Joe Biden did in 1994. He passed a crime bill that his Democrat opponent said locked up disproportionately African-American men, and it took President Trump to come along through the First Step Act and reverse the carnage, the damage, the disrespect done to the black community. He reversed it. President Trump made up for the bad decisions of Vice President Biden.